Welcome to another episode of the Oddball In podcast, a podcast made by Neurodivergent for Neurodivergent, creating a safe space for us to be seen and heard. Hi, my name is Brittany. I'm your host for today's episode, and we're going to talk about in between worlds and integrating the neurotypical world with our neurodivergent experience. I did share in episode 1, but I will share here. I am a late self-diagnosed ADHD individual. I did self-discover this the summer of last year, which would be 2025, and it has been a very adventurous roller coaster ride ever since. But I'm so thankful to have a community and to really be able to tap into resources and such a supportive community that is, just doing their thing, sharing their experiences. And it's been very validating and soothing and healing to know that I haven't been the only person on this planet to experience what I've experienced thus far. But let's jump right in today. I'm going to say that I am now living in two worlds right now, the neurodivergent world and the neurotypical world. And the neurodivergent and neurotypical experience is both an inner and outer situation, right? Because most of my life, the majority of my life, I have masked. And I have masked according to neurotypical standards, right? And so now knowing that I am neurodivergent, this is a new world that I am learning and allowing to exist within myself and also in the physical environments that I am a part of. There are parts of my identity that are tied to both. And now since my late diagnosis, many of those parts, to be honest, feel quite different. And now I'm just figuring out where I need to integrate, where I choose to assimilate, and where it makes more sense for me just to diverge and be my 100% unmasked neurodivergent self. Now, this might be an unpopular opinion. You might, be on board with it, but we can always talk about it within the comment section. But for short-term, low investment interactions with other people, I have decided that I will use my masking skills to get the outcome that I desire. And how I would define short-term, low investment interactions will be like engaging with the store clerk when I go to the grocery store, or calling into the customer service booth. Calling into the customer service line about a bill. Even engaging with, the bank to get a loan, etc. From my many years of masking, I have enough data to confirm that in these instances, it actually is beneficial for me to put on that mask short term in order to get the desired outcome that I have. Now, this is where it got interesting for me because I also know, based off of my previous experience, that for those longer term commitments that I make, whether it's with an employer, with personal relationships, including platonic and romantic, it might not be in my best interest to use masking as the way that I decide to show up in these spaces. And I say that because when I was unaware of the mask before my self-diagnosis, I still experienced the negative effects of a long-term masking. I experienced exhaustion, burnout, and anxiety, to name a few. And also the feeling of not belonging or fitting in anywhere because I was pretending to be somebody that I wasn't, even though I was not aware of it, right? And so now with the awareness of the high cost of masking long term, for my longer term commitments, like as I stated before, employment, personal relationships, I am now willing to unmask full stop, because in the past I wasn't unmasking, but also unmasking way early, and to unmask more often and to advocate for my personal needs up front. Now, this was interesting to actually discover, because it's so funny that even though a little less than 8 months ago, I realized that I was neurodivergent, and yet I have still lived life and have responded and reacted to this neurotypical experience as a neurodivergent person. Now, I do understand in longer term commitments to protect and preserve my mental health and emotional health and physical health, I have to be my authentic neurodivergent self. It's better for me and it's better for the others around me, because what it does is it allows me to see more quickly if these dynamics even serve me or the other person, if we're compatible, right? And so, with me being willing to show up in my more authentic neurodivergent self in these instances really serves everybody that's involved. So let's talk a little bit about assimilation. We've talked about unmasking, integration. Let's talk about assimilation. So I know some neurodivergents pursue being fully unmasked all the time and in every circumstance. Now, I'm not speaking about the members of our community who don't have a choice or control over expressing themselves unmasked, right? But I'm talking about the for us in the community that does have the agency and awareness of this. And I know that many of us in the community hold a core belief that they deserve to be their authentic self all the time. Now, I say, do you, boo? I completely respect that that approach to life, because this is my overall philosophy in general. And this is what I will continue to say as we move along with our episodes and other content that I share online. You do what works for you. You know, for me, my neurodivergence is not another box to stuff myself in. It's actually a way of me expanding of who I really am as being a person on this planet having a human experience, right? And now I have a completely new toolbox that I'm able to express myself way differently than other parts of me. And I am completely okay with that, because that is what makes me human. And for me, strategy that yields me the results that are favorable to me, I will continue to do the strategies that actually work, and give me the results that I want. But I am aware of that there is a balance. And I think that this is where I am just going to have a lot of patience and grace for myself with finding what does that balance look like. And I think as being neurodivergent and as I still evolve and grow as just being human, this balance may look different today, tomorrow, next year, and even 10 or 20, 30 years from now. And I'm open and okay with that, right? Because that's just a part of the journey. Okay. I, Now, before we get out of here, I want to talk about integration a little more. And I have a new philosophy that it did start before my neurodivergence, but it was necessary based off of a personal situation that I was navigating. But let's jump into it. So this philosophy that is gonna serve me with being neurodivergent is less is more, honey. I know that in the past I tended to overshare or be more honest than what the situation required, and I got hurt. My feelings got hurt. Expectations were skewed, and I didn't get the outcome that I was looking for. And I realized that the neurotypical world does not operate in this manner. They are like the direct opposite of this. From my point of view, the neurotypical world operates in playing roles and performance and illusion. And so, no one really shows their hand up front. And unfortunately, I've learned this the hard way. So now I'm going to take a page out of their book. I'm not showing my full hand, or I decide how much of my hand that I will show and with whom I will share it with. And that's my personal agency. And that is an empowering place for me to be, because for most of my life, I outsourced my agency. I deferred what I should do, how I should show up, my self-worth on things that were outside of myself versus what actually benefited and served me. And so now at this point, with me being neurodivergent and knowing that I have the agency to choose how much I want to share of myself, my personal life, my inner world, and that is up to me to decide. And I know that a lot of times many of us do hold the core belief of being honest and transparent, but I would encourage you don't have to abandon those core values. You just decide how and how much and when you will use those. You know what I mean? Because if I was to tell you anything, always be honest with yourself. You owe that to yourself first. Always be transparent with yourself, because you owe that to yourself first. Because the person that you're gonna spend the most time with ever in this lifetime is you. So the relationship between me and me, between me, myself, and I is the most important relationship that I could ever cultivate and nurture. Okay. So I just wanted to share that little tidbit there. In closing, I just want to leave you with this. I did mention it briefly earlier, but I want to touch back on it. I want you to allow your neurodivergence to expand your identity and not box you back in. We've lived most of our existence in boxes that did not serve us, did not completely represent us. And so I want you to allow your neurodivergence to enhance and enrich your life, not to shrink it, you know, to add to who you know yourself to be at your core, because neurodivergence is a part of that core self, At least I do see that for myself. And this is a reminder for me also, because I'll be honest, there are some very hard moments that I've had with being neurodivergent. I did go off into more of the heavier topics in my first episode of the podcast. And I just talked about, the grief process that I've been experiencing with being late diagnosed. But even with that, it still adds color and depth and unique experience to me as being human. And it also adds a layer of complexity, and I just liken it to a good movie. Now, some people might enjoy a very simple plot line, but the movies that do well in the box office often have these twists and turns and complexities and nuances and dichotomies and, juxtapositions, all of these things, that add and enhance the experience of watching the movie. And I see that for me as being neurodivergent, and I just want to let you know that being neurodivergent doesn't make you other. It makes you human. I will see you all in the next video. Until then, you take care.